Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Stacy Ellis and this is my August wrap up, what books I read in the month of August. So I'm actually quite impressed with myself. I think there's something about booktube which motivates me to get more reading done. I definitely got through a lot more books this month than I have all year long. And it might be in part because of the types of books that I'm reading, and also I am doing audiobooks as well. But I am very excited. I had set a goal to read 30 books for this year, and I surpassed that during this month of August. So I'm currently at 34 books. And so I'm just going to aim for 50 books now between now and the end of the year. We'll see if I will actually get to that point. I think part of the reason why I was able to read so much was because it was the summertime. School hasn't started, but it just started this past week. And I'm going to be very busy. I have 2 classes that I'm teaching, and I will be actually driving to do my research. I have to drive pretty far, and so I know I'm going to be pretty busy. But I can also listen to audiobooks. That's what I've done this past week when I had to commute. I had to do a 2.5 hour drive. So 5 hours in one day. So I got through an audiobook during that drive. But yeah, y'all can feel my pain. This coming semester is definitely going to be very busy for me. But it's okay. I'm going to graduate soon. But I am here to tell you guys what I read in the month of August. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to use my Goodreads, just like I did last time. So first off, I had 2 DNFs. They're not necessarily... Okay. Like I said, I'm fairly new to booktube. And watching other booktubes, you hear of, different books that people are reading. And, typically I read a lot of nonfiction. I read a lot of nonfiction Christian books, and nonfiction just, nutrition and self-help. But I have recently got into the fiction. But because I haven't read fiction in so long, I don't really know exactly what I like. And so I decided to try out some different genres. And lo and behold, I know that there's some I don't like now, for sure. So first one that I DNF was, let me open it. I was listening to the audiobook of the Baxters. You guys, I know you're probably thinking, Stacy, you're doing this again. Okay, but go like this, you can see it, kind of. The Baxters. So this is book 0 in the Baxter series. So this was written, I guess, after all the other books were written. And it's not that it wasn't a good story. I was listening to it, and I was hooked. Like, Kingsbury is an excellent writer. She was writing and I was really in tune and listening. But I found that I started to, I guess, crave some of those things that were going on. So the Baxters is a love story. It's a romance. And it appears, I was looking at other Kingsbury books. She writes romance. And so that was my first official romance, I guess you can say. I mean, I've read stories where there was a romance in there, but it wasn't the main story. And so for her, there's just certain things that she would say in the writing that made me want that from my husband. And so for me, I thought that that was a red flag because I should not be comparing my husband to what other men are doing to women. And so I felt convicted, which is why I DNF'd the book. So like I said, the book in itself I thought was good, but for me, I thought that it would have caused some issues with me and my husband. I did not want to think negatively about my husband. I did not want to compare my husband and what he does and what I, like, oh, I wish my husband would do this type thing, or, I didn't want that. I don't want to entertain that by any means. So I DNF'd the book because I just felt convicted. I did not want, I love my husband dearly, and I don't want to get the impression that my marriage and my romance life is a subpar because I read a book and I hear things and I start thinking, oh, I wish that, I have something like that in my love life. So that's why I DNF'd it. I probably will not read any more of Karen Kingsbury's books because of that, because I don't want to, again, I'm a married woman and I don't want to cause conflict in my marriage. There's other people I know that they're fine with reading romance and they can, separate the two. But I just felt convicted while I was listening to it. I know it's Christian. It's a Christian story. I was interested to see what happened, because some of them, they weren't following after God. But like I said, I had to follow what the Holy Spirit was telling me, and so I DNF'd it. The other book that I DNF'd, again, these were Christian fiction. So I listened to other booktubers, and this was an author that was recommended, Ted Dekker, AD30. And it was, again, this one was pretty good too. Ted Dekker is definitely very good with his words. I will say that I don't even think I made it halfway. I think I made it like 25% of the way. For me, he's too gruesome. And I know that this isn't even one of his most gruesome works. But for me, the description, he's so good with his words when he was describing. So there's a scene near the beginning of the book where there's some violence that occurs with the main character's family. And for me, I did not, like, when that came up, I did not like it at all. I was like, if this was a movie, I would not watch this. Like, this was rated R for sure. I can't. I'm very good at the description in my head. Sometimes I would even think it's worse than if I were to watch it in a movie. So for me, I didn't like it. But I was like, okay, but people say, give it a try. It might be okay. And so I looked up reviews on the book, and that particular scene that I was talking to you about, everyone said that was the worst scene. And, like Jesus comes in later in the book and whatnot. So I was going to keep, this was an audiobook. I was like, okay, I'm going to keep listening to it because they said that was it. That was the only scene. But my problem was they kept referring back to that scene. And so even though that scene was over, it was like a memory that would come back. And I was like, I just can't do this. I can't do this. If they're going to refer back to this incident, I can't, I want this image blocked from my head. So I DNF'd it. And to be honest, because this was my first time I read any Ted Dekker books, I probably will not open another Ted Dekker book because of that. Because I've heard other people say that there are some books that are a little squeamish, and no one has said that this one was squeamish. AD30, no one. So if this was squeamish for me, then I know that all his other books are probably not for me. So if you're like me, if you're extra sensitive to stuff like that, don't read Ted Dekker stuff. He's an excellent writer. I'm not trying to bash Ted Dekker, but for people like me who can't, handle. And one of the reviews that I listened to, they said that this book was PG-13. This is rated R. Like, that scene alone is rated R. In my opinion. So, that's my opinion on that. So those were the two that I DNF'd this past month. Now we get to the books that I read. So, I'm gonna go. I have a stack of books, so I guess I'm just gonna go in the order. Oh, I did give those books a rating, even though I DNF'd it. So the Baxters, I gave it 3 stars. And the AD30, I gave 3 stars as well. So, yeah. They weren't like horrible. They would have got a higher score if they didn't have all that stuff in there, probably. But, okay. I'm just going to go in a random order because I have a stack of books and I think that'll be the easiest. Okay, so I did do what I've been saying. I've been reading middle grade books to help with my reading speed. And so the first middle grade book that I read was a book that I've had since I was a child. And it was an American Girl book, Meet Felicity. I read this book only one time before this time that I read it. And I completely forgot the story. And I actually thought this was kind of sweet. This lets me know that if I want a sweet middle grade books to read, book series, the American Girl series I think will be a good one for me. So the American Girl series follows different American girls during different times in history, and so Felicity is one of the first ones that they did a book on, and this one is about an adventure of a horse and Felicity pretty much saving a horse. And so I liked it. I like horses. I don't have a horse. One day I would like to have one. I think they're beautiful creatures. There's certain animals that just, I don't know. Horses are just one of those animals that are just like so majestic looking. Like, I don't know. I feel like God like makes certain animals to be kind of like a hierarchy. And I feel like horses are just one of those. It's just like when you look at them, they have like a regalness to them. But anyways, so this one I liked. It was just sweet and simple. I gave it 3 stars. It was a good story. It's very sweet. Yeah. So that was my first one. And then I had another book that I've had since I was a kid, and I read this one a few times when I was younger. And it's Horrible Harry and the Green Slime. Horrible Harry series is so funny. I love Horrible Harry. If I find any of these books, I probably will buy them because it's humorous, and sometimes you just want to laugh. Last time I talked about Ramona, and Ramona making me laugh. Well, Harry is another one that I can read and it would make me laugh. So it's just it's a very short, very short book, and pretty much every chapter is like its own story. It's just funny. So I gave this 4 stars. Then I read, I am still reading this beloved thick book, Sons of Encouragement. It has 5 novellas. And I finished the 3rd novella in August, which is on Jonathan. It follows the story of Jonathan and how Jonathan, he was the friend of David. And I really did enjoy it. He was considered the prince, but I felt like the story was more like a warrior story. Because, they went into battle and all of that. I gave it 5 stars. I will be honest, I have not read any other stories from in here. I don't want to say a slump, but I kind of just wanted to take a break from this book. I'm on Amos now, and I started the first chapter, but I didn't finish it because I just wasn't in the mood to read it, which is weird because I feel like I've given every single story from Francine Rivers a 5 stars, so you would think that I would want to just go ahead and read the next story, but I didn't. So I mean, ever since like the beginning of the month, I haven't, like, I've attempted to read it. Like, I'll do a little bit at a time, but it wasn't like how it was reading the other stories where just like every day I was reading a little bit of it. And yeah, but we'll see. Maybe in September I'll finish Amos. That's the next story in here. But yeah, so far every story in this book has gotten 5 stars from me. Definitely a favorite. Okay, another middle grade. I actually did a separate video on this, and it is the Babysitters Club. So if you want to see a reaction of a grown woman reading the Babysitters Club for the first time, watch that video. I never read Babysitters Club before then. I think that my insights will be interesting for you guys. I gave this 4 stars, but with... just watch my other video. I pretty much stated that, you know, there's certain things about this book I did not like. About how the main character was kind of... yeah. I didn't like certain attributes of her the way that she acted towards the adults, so to speak. And I don't know if I feel comfortable if I had a child, if I would let them read this book because of that. So watch my Babysitters Club video to see exactly what I'm talking about. But I did enjoy the story overall, and I have gotten the second book in the series, and I'll be reading that one as well. So 4 stars for that. Then I did do one nonfiction theology book, John MacArthur, The Glory of Heaven. So this was a reread for me. I've read this before, but there's also in the back, there's, I guess, I don't know if they're sermons or essays. I don't know what you would call them. But there's 5 different, I guess, appendixes that were added from other theologians from, you know, years past. So we have, let's see. I'm looking for the author's name. So this is by John MacArthur. But the added sermons, we have Richard Baxter. We have Thomas Boston. Charles Spurgeon. J.C. Ryle. Okay, so it's just 4. So those were in the back. So I read the whole book again, and I read the sermons. The first time I read it, I didn't read the sermons in the back because it's older. You know, the older writing, it was boring, and at that time I just wasn't feeling it. But I did read it this time. It's a good book about heaven, but I don't know. I felt like it felt short. And it might be because this is old. It was written in 1996. And so if you're familiar with John MacArthur, he criticizes people who have false doctrine that they're, you know, if they're sharing false doctrine, he will definitely call you out. And so he does that in this book. And being that, you know, it was 1996, like, that's pretty outdated. Like, I haven't heard of some of the stories that he was talking about in here. I do like the parts where he's talking about heaven, you know, in more detail. But this is a typical John MacArthur book. I mean, he's an apologist in a sense, defending the Word of God. I would have loved this to be a little bit more like praiseworthy and glorious. Some of the sermons were in the back. But his book in general wasn't. It was still good information, but it wasn't what I expected. Like, when I think of the glory of heaven, I think, oh, you know, like it come to me. I would assume it would be a little bit more praise heavy, and I just didn't get that from there. So that's why I gave it 3 stars. It was still good, but not good enough to get higher rating. And then I had another nonfiction book. This is King's Rules by Alveda King. She's the niece of Martin Luther King Jr. And so she is discussing in this book pretty much what was it like to be a king. What were the qualities that if you were in this family, what, you know, would be things that you would stand by and stand behind. And so she doesn't just talk about Martin Luther King, she talks about her other uncle, and she talks about her dad, and pretty much just like life in general, her family in general. And, you know, she goes through, you know, different rules, 10 rules, I guess you can say, about, or what it says, 10 truths for you, your family, and our nation to prosper. And the rules are actually pretty good. I only gave this 2 stars. Not because the rules aren't good rules. It was just, for me, it was redundant. Like, I already, like, live by these rules. But there were interesting things in this book. You know, if you're interested in history and how people lived, how they might have disciplined, you know, then this would be a good read. I'll be honest, I ended up scanning through a lot of the stories and just read her rules and the self-help part. In part because her stories are a lot like my family's stories, and like it wasn't anything for me. It wasn't anything new, and I just didn't care to hear it. And that might sound bad, but I really didn't care because it's like our family does that already. My family believes that already. My family, you know, the stories for me, I guess if your family might have been from like up north, that stuff might have been foreign to you maybe. I don't know, but yeah. And I thought it was interesting. There was one thing in here. So, Planned Parenthood apparently gave Martin Luther King Jr. An award. And a lot of people in the conservative movement use that to kind of bash him and say that he's pro-abortion and all of that. But she brings out the fact that Planned Parenthood was not originally a pro-abortion clinic. That was later, and it was actually after Martin Luther King had died. So she said that her family, including Martin Luther King Jr., was against abortion, and she strongly feels that if he would have known that they would have became, you know, a pro-choice type of thing, he probably would have not have taken that award to begin with. Now that's her say, you know. We won't know because he's not here to actually say it. But this is just going off of what her impression is of her family and what she knows of Martin Luther King. There is one thing in here that I do want to read to you guys. You know, like I said, this is talking about your family along with the nation. And there was a poem in here about children that I really liked. And so I'm going to read it to you. The poem is by Dorothy Law Nolt. And it says, "Children learn what they live." This is the title of the poem. And it goes, "If children live with criticism, they learn to condemn. If children live with hostility, they learn to fight. If children live with ridicule, they learn to be shy. If children live with shame, they learn to feel guilty. If children live with encouragement, they live with confidence. If children live with tolerance, they live to be patient. If children live with praise, they learn to appreciate. If children live with acceptance, they learn to love. If children live with approval, they learn to love. If children live with honesty, they learn truthfulness. If children live with security, they learn to have faith in themselves and others. If children live with friendliness, they learn the world is a nice place in which to live." So I really like that. I don't have children, but I think that's wise words. You know, it's very important that we teach our children appropriately. So that's my nonfiction for this month. And then I had, I'll go ahead and finish with these before I do my audiobooks. So I love Romona. So I actually got through 2 Romona books for this month. So I did the Beezus and Romona. This one actually wasn't as good as Ramona the Pest. Ramona the Pest actually seemed funnier to me, but it was still a good read. There were still some parts that were funny. This was the first book in the series, and I think they probably found out that people liked Ramona more. Because, I mean, it sounds like it started with Beezus, and then she switched to Ramona in the books. Which, in my opinion, Ramona is funnier and more interesting in the stories. Not that Beezus isn't cool. But one thing that I thought was interesting when I was reading this, I was like, this was me and my sister. I was the annoying little sister, and my older sister, Constance, was the sister that was always reading and was pretty much like bossing me around. And so this book reminded me of that. We're only a year apart. It's not like, I mean, they're a few years apart, but it did remind me of me and my sister. And then I also read Ramona the Brave. And this one I think I gave 4 stars as well. Yeah, I gave this one 4 stars. So far Ramona the Pest was the best one. This one was still good, but I was kind of confused with the title of the book because it says Ramona the Brave, and like the whole entire book I was like, okay, when is she being brave? And it really wasn't until the very last chapter where her bravery is shown, I guess. But that could be debated if that's real bravery or not. But, hey. I wouldn't call the title The Brave, but I guess it kind of is, I guess. I don't know. So, that was that. And then I had a few audiobooks. So, I already shared some. Again, I was trying to try out some new genres. So the next genre I had, I guess, is like a thriller mystery. So Terri Blackstock, Aftermath. I guess this is her newest book. So I listened to this in audiobook. So this was actually the very first Terri Blackstock book. I've heard people that I've read. I've heard people say that this wasn't her best writing. And they didn't like it as much. But I guess because I've never read any of her books, for me, this was actually, I was like, oh, this is actually kind of entertaining. So I actually enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. So, if that says anything to you, you know, I thought it was pretty good. So it's called Aftermath because there was a bomb that took place, and they're trying to figure out who did the bomb, and you know, all that type of stuff. So it's like a mystery, but I kind of figured out who it was, which I don't know if we were supposed to find out who it was before they said who it was, but I did figure it out. And then I also did another audiobook. Everyone was talking about the If I Run series. So right after I listened to the Aftermath, I also listened to If I Run. Which for me, like, I actually like the Aftermath better than this one. I don't know why. Maybe because it's just the first book in the series. I have not gotten to the other books yet. I'm waiting for my library to have it available. But it was still pretty good. I was actually kind of annoyed that it was, like, they were talking, I guess, in first person. And I was getting confused because it would switch between characters sometimes. Which I guess if you had the book, it would be easier than the audio. But I still gave it 4 stars. I thought it was a pretty good book, and I'm definitely going to read the second and third one. So there was that. And then we have... I decided to do Wrinkle in Time because I wanted to do something that was fun, a children's story type thing. So I listened to the audio book of Wrinkle in Time, and I fell in love with this story. It's interesting because it's like a mix between like fantasy and sci-fi. There's I haven't watched the movie. I want to watch it. I have a feeling that the movie probably is nothing like the book, because in the book it's Christian. There's Bible verses everywhere in there, and there's Christian principles. And Disney does not come across to me as a Christian company, so I have a feeling they probably changed the story, which is common with Disney. They normally change stories in order to meet their, what they're trying to do. But I really did like it. I actually want to get a hard copy of the book. I listened to it on audio. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, so I didn't want to buy it. And it was actually quite interesting, to the point that I started to read the other books in the series. So I just finished yesterday the second book in the series, A Wind in the Door. It was just as interesting. I kind of feel as though, so these both were written by Madeline Engel. I kind of feel like she might have gotten criticism after the first book, because the first book, there were Bible verses throughout the story. In the second book, it was kind of more discreet, the Christian principles. I mean, the characters, like, I definitely saw, okay, this is an angel, this is a demon, good versus evil, don't get possessed, and, you gotta fight, and there's the sacrificial element in the story as well, but it wasn't as deliberate as the first book, and I think that might be in part because she might have gotten criticism. When I was looking at some of the reviews, people did not know what to do with her first book. It was just like kind of like, they're like, what genre is this? Like, because it was a mix of everything. It had Christian fiction, it had science fiction, it had fantasy, and so I think that might be in part why her second book is like that. I don't know. I'm going to try, and I'm going to read all the books in the series. And eventually I would like to get a hard copy, because there's a lot in them. A lot of symbolic things. It's definitely deep. Like children can read these, but definitely adults can read these too. Because there's definitely some deep principles in these books. And so I want to reread them. And one of the things that I like about it, so I am artsy, and for the longest I haven't thought of things that I can draw. And reading, or I guess I should say listening, because I was listening to the audiobook, there were things that she was describing that I want to draw now. Like, I want to try to figure out if I can picture how these things would have looked. There were different creatures in these books that I think might look cool, like if I tried to draw them on a page or something. So I gave that one 4 stars as well. Definitely enjoyed that. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 books. 12 if you want to take away the 2 DNFs, because I did not finish 2 of them. That's a lot of books for me, who normally gets through maybe 2 or 3. So thank you, booktube. You are definitely motivating me to read more. Granted, a lot of these were small books, but that's more than what I was doing in the past. So thank you for motivating me, booktube, to read more. It definitely has made an impression. Yeah. And granted, so this is what I finished. I always read multiple books at a time. If you go on my Goodreads, you will see what I'm currently reading. And so there's books that I've started that I'm not done with, because I'm kind of a mood reader. I read what I feel like reading. And so sometimes I might get tired of a book, and instead of just like completely like not going back to it, I'm like, okay, I'll just read another book and then come back later, type thing. But yeah, this was a long video because I got through a lot more books than I anticipated. And I actually didn't really talk a whole lot about all the books, so I hope they're of interest to you. If you are someone like me who like things to just bring you joy, I hope these gave you some great ideas of some books to read. And with that, I guess I will let you guys go. Make sure that if you're not already subscribed, you subscribe. Turn on the bell and like the video so I know you like these types of videos. And I guess I'll see you guys next time.